Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let 'em have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. Today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing John O'Sullivan, who's the founder of Changing the Game Project. He's an internationally known speaker, author, consultant to the US Olympic Committee, US Soccer, even Aussie Rules Football. I'm very glad to read that in his bio. Rugby, all sorts of sports, and really just a bit of a go-to expert, especially on youth sports. And his TEDx talk is fantastic. I actually watched it a number of years ago. So I'm excited to bring this interview to life, John. And shout out to Marley Woods, who connected us. Marley, appreciate you and look forward to seeing you in Cincinnati this weekend. So, John, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. We were chatting away before hitting record, and we probably could have just kept going. And I think that's always a good start when you almost forget to hit record.
Exactly. I have done it once. That was super embarrassing. I have a big sign above my computer, so I'm only human.
Thing.
Yeah. All right. We love a pattern break question. The first one I've got for you is: if team culture was an object, what object would it be?
Circle. A circle, a ball, a circle, right? Ball if it needs more dimension. But the idea of that would be, sometimes when a team, we huddle up, right? And everyone kind of piles in. Well, the problem in the huddle is that some people are behind, they're out, they're whatever. But the circle, and we think about all the traditions, the Native American traditions, and how powerful Eastern thought, the power of the circle. We're all equals. We're all there. We're all looking at each other's eyes. No one can hide their eyes. No one can wander behind. No one can be, not focused. And so, in our work, we talk a lot about, especially with teams, the circle being both a symbol and a signal, right? The symbol, like we just talked about, but then a signal that now we've come together. Now practice starts. Right? And we finish with a circle. Now practice is over. But in between the two circles, we are all here. We were all working. We were all committed to this group. And so, yeah, that's the one that pops into my head.
I love that. And I think it's an anchor as well, isn't it? So it's the anchor to signify, hey, now we're switching on, whatever that means at whatever level. And yeah, there's so much significance in a circle. So love that choice, mate. Fantastic. All right. Team culture. I forgot to mention in your bio that you've played professionally soccer at a very high level. Talk to me about a team that potentially you were a part of where the culture wasn't good. Did you ever experience that?
Yeah.
Or a negative experience of team culture?
Yeah, and I think there's different levels of it. And I wasn't a great player. Managed to get paid to play for a little while. I had a couple of injuries and had to stop by the time I was 26. But there's different types of culture, and I think there's probably differences between men and women. So I can only speak from my male perspective, where men tend to compete in order to bond. Right. A couple of my university teams and NCAA Division I soccer team where we had a lot of talent and we got along great. Right. And still I'm in text groups or chat groups with these guys from 30 years ago. Right. They're dear friends. They're amazing. So the culture off the field was amazing. But the culture on the field, the standard wasn't held, by the coaching staff to set a standard that we would all adhere to and aspire to, so that, it became sort of apparent of like, well, you're not supposed to go out partying, but if I do, no one's going to say anything, so I'll go party, right? I'll be late to practice. I won't go to, I remember off-season weight training and like 10 of the 20 people would show up, These little things that by themselves aren't a big thing, but they add up. And so then you lose your competitive culture, right? This idea that we are all bought in together. Well, no, that guy next to me is not bought in. He was out drinking until 2 a.m. I can't trust him, right? So it's really interesting. It was not a dislike or anything as human beings, but a distrust as players that, like I remember, my senior year, we tied the number 2 team in the nation. And then the next game we lost to a terrible team, and it's like, how can we do that on one week and the next week we're this bad? And it's because the standard wasn't there. And so that culture was lacking, which was sad because the ability was there, the talent was there. Just, we needed a little more from our coaches in that moment to show, no, this is a real standard here. And, I was a player there, so it's my fault too,
Yeah.
I didn't know better.
Yeah. Do you think once the standards are set, is it the players that help keep each other accountable, or do you think it's more coach driven, or what's the balance within that?
I mean, it's all the above, I think, right? Like, so I think that in the best cultures, the players are driving the standard, right? But the coach has to be there as the ultimate adjudicator. So I think standards, there's sort of 3 phases. First, I hold myself to the standard. So it's a self-coaching thing, right? That it starts with me. Now, if I'm not meeting the standard and I'm not willing to hold myself accountable, then my teammates hold me accountable. And only if I can't and my teammates can't, now the coach steps in. But I think in the best environments, the coach doesn't have to step in very often, right? Or their intervention comes around like, hey, listen, this person isn't meeting the standard, but this is, but there's things going on with this person that you all don't know about at home, in their lives, whatever. So maybe that's why they're not meeting it. If the coach doesn't do her job or his job and the players don't, well, that's when it all falls apart.
Well, thank you for saying she and he. I can't tell you the number of times on this podcast where we assume that a coach is a man, especially in sports. So I appreciate that you did that.
I've coached with amazing female coaches who are just awesome coaches, and so that's comfortable for me. And also coached women and coached men collegiately and youth level and everything. So I try to be a little, or my daughter would knock on the office door here and be like, Dad, come on.
I love that. And just going back to what you said, I think there's a great take-home message there in the workplace as well. Mm-hmm. So it's your workmates help each other accountable. Then it's potentially a manager or a leader, and then potentially the C-suite level if they need to. So that's a nice crossover there in relation to standards, accountability, authenticity, and really living team culture, which is so important in the workplace as well. Let's totally flip it for a minute. I want to go down the path of cultural differences and impact on coaching styles, just because of you mentioned Aussie rules footy, you mentioned rugby within Ireland. And I'm wondering is there sort of one universal value that transcends the borders and sports, or do you really notice a cultural difference in the way we go about our coaching style?
Yes and yes. So I think if you are a coach working or a business leader working across different cultures, right, like the essence of any leadership is relationships, right? It's not X's and O's. It's not tactics. It's understanding who's in front of you and what do they need. And so obviously the more you can understand about their culture, where you're working or where they're coming from, the more effective you're going to be in connecting with that human being. That being said, I think regardless of culture, everyone wants to be valued, respected. Let's just put that all under love. Make me feel loved, right? Let me know that you are in it for me. Any leader who makes their people feel like I'm in it for you, for your, and not self-interest, but for your best interest, they're more likely to follow you. They're more likely to work harder for you. They're more likely to be more fulfilled in their work. And so I don't think, whether you're from the United States or Australia or Canada or Brazil, there's anyone out there going, no, please disrespect me, don't value me, don't empower me. That's going to make me my best. Like, that's not happening, right? So, we use this acronym we call it the river. When you make people feel relevant, important, valued, empowered, respected, that's when they perform their bst. And if you don't believe that, do the opposite and see how people do.
Yep, so true. Let's talk about, why do kids play sport? I mean, obviously, big shout out with your TEDx talk, and of course, the famous 5 words that we encourage parents to say to their kids. I love watching you play. Mm-hmm. Right, such a powerful message. Let's get to the truth of, why do kids play sport?
I mean, joy, fun. Kids might use the word fun. As adults, we call it joy. Understanding what that is, I think, is what gets missed, right? We say, this is, if I had $1 for every time some parent asked me, when does it stop being fun and start being competitive, right? I wouldn't be working anymore, because this is like one of the biggest misconceptions. It never should stop being fun. Professional athletes, like, they get joy out of it, which drives intrinsic motivation, which drives ownership, which drives mastery. And so the problem is that there's this myth that these two things can't coexist, but they do. So joy, right? What is joy? Joy for a kid is being respected, getting playing time. Coaches who are organized and who listen and who care deeply. As I move on in sport, as I move to a higher level, joy is also the demanding environment, the competitive environment, the environment that pushes me. Just because it's hard doesn't mean there's no joy in it. Just because you're like, man, that was the hardest practice, can't wait to do that again tomorrow, right? That's how truly elite athletes view things like that. And so the essence, even for professional athletes, is, I think when the joy of competing diminishes and the difficulty, right, injuries, stresses, or whatever, exceed the joy, that's when people retire at the highest level, right? That's when they're like, yeah, I'm just not going to do this anymore, because there's no more intrinsic love, because it's just too hard.
Totally agree. And playing devil's advocate for a minute, what about the minute it gets too hard and kids want to quit? What are your thoughts on resiliency and building that up and supporting kids in that space?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things, right? This is a big question from a parenting perspective, slightly different than a coaching perspective. And we love this word resiliency, and resiliency also has to do with fit, right? So have you found the right fit, right? A kid who plays lots of tennis and isn't really good at tennis and wants to go try something else doesn't mean they're not resilient. It's just they've got a bad fit in that moment, right? And so there's no black and white of like, when's this the right decision? But sometimes, it's that swimmer who's never going to make it as a swimmer, but might be a hell of a triathlete, right? Quitting swimming to take up running and cycling and combining those doesn't mean they're not a gritty person. It just means the swimming wasn't the perfect fit for it. You know what I mean? And so I think we always have to be careful as a parent. If our child wants to doesn't want to play anymore, well, let's get at, why? Why isn't this working? And it might not be working because of a negative coaching environment or a negative team culture and bullying environment there. Okay, maybe that's the right reason. my coach is hard and he doesn't let me play my favorite position. Well, that's maybe not, we're going to stick that out because you made a commitment to see this through.
Yeah.
At the end of the season, you don't have to go to tryouts again. You don't have to play again next year, but you will fulfill your commitment at this point. And so I think as a parent, that's the art of parenting, not the science of parenting, right? Like how do I walk the line and dig in and really try to find out why isn't this a good fit? I have two kids who are both in college now, and my kids are, played a lot of soccer growing up, and both of them, they wanted to, after their senior year of high school soccer, they didn't want to play their last year of club soccer. My daughter said, I need to work, and I also want to go. We live by a ski mountain. I want to go teach skiing in the winter, and then decided I want to play tennis in the spring, right? And I want to play a new sport. And my son was sort of the same thing. He's like, I've kind of been there and done that, and he took up boxing, right? And so it was like, it was their path. It was well reasoned. They had done this. They had accomplished what they wanted to, and they were ready to do something else. Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what advice have you got for, again, I have lots of leaders and business coaches listening to this podcast that have kids and they want to coach their kids. What are your thoughts on that? Should you coach
Like
your kids?
being a parent coach?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was like some of the greatest joy of my life. I got to coach both my kids when they were really young, starting out 5, 6. And then I got to coach them both in sort of like middle school into high school ages as well. And it was awesome. And it's hard. And so you have to have kind of thick skin. Number one, like you have to be, and let me just say, like, none of you will screw it up more than I did. So like far from perfect, right? But the ability to take off your coaching hat and put on parent hat is super important. Practice has to end. The game has to end. You can't be coaching all the time. Number two, you have conversations as a coach, maybe about other players on the team, and you have to be mindful about not having them in front of your kid and talking about their teammates maybe in a negative way or things like that. And then communicating with your kids, like, you still okay if I coach? Like, is this still working out for you? And then you have to be thick-skinned in that no matter what you do, you're going to be perceived as playing favorites, right? So when you coach your kid, it doesn't matter, if you bench them all the time, your kid suffers and you're perceived for, well, they shouldn't have been on the team anyway. And if you play them all the time, that's not fair. My kid's not playing. And it's just amazing. You can't do right. And so I think it's just being honest, being truthful, putting your kid in the right place. And, I coached my daughter and had to, cut her and put her on the B team because that's exactly where she belonged. Right. And, I coached my son, who was kind of, for a couple of years, a tweener between the A and the B team. And I would swing him back and forth because I coached both teams. And, so it's just these communication. But someone always thinks it's unfair.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability within that. So true. And I love knowing when to wear what hat. So important. So what do athletes really want from their coaches?
We kind of talked about this a little bit. I think, like, just make me feel loved, be in it for me. Yeah, again, this is in general, right? Every athlete is, all generalities end at the individual level. So depending on their pathway as well. So someone who's really trying to achieve the next level and something more, usually the higher level they get, as probably in business, right? This idea of like the criticism sandwich is BS. There's no research behind that, right? Give direct, honest feedback, but take into account their emotional state when you're giving the feedback. So pick your times. They want to connect, in probably the most powerful coaching tool is the individual meeting, right? Like the one-on-one conversation. What should we talk about? They need to get better, so they need to be pushed. but then they also need to recover. You know, there's so many things that are really tailored to the individual. A kid who never gets a hug at home probably needs a hug from their coach. Kid who never gets discipline at home probably needs discipline from their coach. And so it's really understanding, right? One of my favorite quotes is, you know, you coach a child, not a sport. Coach a person, not a sport. And I think in business, you know, you lead a person, not an accountant, not a salesperson. You lead a human being. What do they need?
Yep. So I'll just combine that with our guiding question. What do you think makes a great coach?
Love, trust, vulnerability.
Beautiful.
And I'd have to put a fourth word, which is competence.
Yeah.
Right. Being vulnerable without competence is not a good combination.
No, 100%. Love that. I want your reflections on your podcast, Way of Champions. What would you say, reflecting on your podcast, what pops out? Maybe it was an interview, someone said something that either challenged your thinking or made you more curious about a certain topic in coaching. Is something come to mind?
Yeah, like 1,000 different things come to mind, right? There's so many. We've been so blessed. I think we're at, you know, episode 440 or something, and we've done one a week. So that's 440 straight weeks that we have managed to release an episode, which has been pretty cool. And amazing people, right? Household names like a Phil Jackson or a Steve Kerr, or, you know, just before this one we did today, we're with a former NHL head coach and stuff like that. And so it'd be really hard to dig back through all of those things. And probably everything I said, you know, Jerry, my co-host, he loves to say, you know, I'm a flute and I take in all this stuff from all these really smart people, and then I blow it through the flute and try to make it sound pretty and make sense, right? And I feel like that's kind of everything that I talk about these days. Is I stand on the shoulders of giants. But one thing that's been really resonating with me lately, that we had a former NCAA basketball coach on named Mark Gottfried, and he worked as an assistant coach at UCLA and spent a lot of time with John Wooden. And this has just been resonating in my head as I go through my daily life, my interactions with my children, my interactions with people in business, friends as well. And he said, the softest pillow is a clear conscience, right? And I really, really love that concept of know who you are, right? You have to be self-aware. Know who you are, know what you stand for, know the non-negotiables of your life, and then live your life that way. And if you lose your job, if you get fired, if you don't win, you'll still sleep like a baby at night. But if you start to violate those things that drive you and matter most, even if you win, you'll be in torment. And I think that's just really resonated with me lately as a 53-year-old with kids moving on and different things happening in my life. Yeah, it's been, I've lost both my parents in the last 14 months. So it's like a lot of big changes in my life, and making sure I can sleep well at night has been a big part of it.
What a simple, beautiful line. It's a bit like, I love watching you play. The softest pillow is a clear conscience. Fantastic. Another, is that 5 words? Almost 6.
There's a lot of math on this podcast.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, it's high level. Did I not warn you? You know,
I learned during the pandemic, trying to help my kids in school, that 8th grade math is it for me. I'm done beyond that. So
let's talk about the Changing Game project. I know you started that in 2012, and that was your first book. What was the thing that got under your skin that was the catalyst for this project?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I'd been coaching for quite a while. You know, NCAA coach, youth coach, high school coach. And you start to see patterns repeating. And I was seeing a lot at that time of parents lacking information on how to best support their kids in the process. And I'd coached enough kids to watch kids go on and excel and, turn professional and do that. And I'd watch kids with great ability quit because of that the parents had stolen the ownership and joy of the experience from them, right? It became this like we and this coexistence. We struck out 10 people. We scored 3 goals today. No, we didn't do any of that, right? So it was that combined with my own kids who are moving into sport. Now I was viewing sport not just from the coaching lens, but the parent lens of, well, what do I want for my kids out of this experience? And their mom was a Division I athlete as well, and so we both were very aligned that sport was going to be something that developed them as human beings. And if they were both driven and wanted to perform at the next level, that had to come from them, and we would have the tools to support them in that. But that's not our path. That's not our decision. That's theirs. And so those things came together. And so I decided I was really burnt out with sort of the politics of running a youth sports organization. I've been doing it a while. I needed a break. I wanted to kind of be there for my own family more. And so I wrote this book called Changing the Game. And the publisher was like, "This is great. How are you going to sell it?" I don't know. Right. And so that's how Change the Game project was born. Like, well, you should start a blog. You're a good writer. And so it started as a blog that I was writing weekly and then bi-weekly and whatever, but lots and lots of just getting my thoughts out on paper. That's what, and because, I had a background, I love to do research and stuff. And, I didn't just sort of write my thoughts. I got the science, and I said, well, what does the science say, and how can I distill this down for parents in sport and coaches in sport? And so what happened was the national governing bodies picked up on this, and they said, hey, this is great, and we can use this because it's not just some guy who had a random thought this morning. Like, he took the research on talent identification and he made it digestible, and he wrote a good blog, and people are reading it. And that all led to TED Talks, but then, consulting work and talks and with US ski and snowboard and soccer and ice hockey and, all the swimming, all these different sports that I never played or participated in, but they just said no, and it was actually funny. Like, I don't know if you've seen this, but as a soccer coach walking into a room of soccer coaches, there's always this kind of ego thing of like, well, who knows more about the sport and who coached at a higher level? But when I walk into a room of ice hockey coaches, I'm like, you all know way more about hockey than me. So let's get that out of the way. And then let's meet in the middle where we talk about communicating and inspiring and motivating, because that's coaching.
Yep, I actually can 100% relate to that.
Yeah, there you go, right?
Yeah. I appreciate that. So, and of your 4 books, Every Moment Matters, does it?
So it's a funny, so the title, right? And so that was a book I wrote on coaching. It's been my bestseller, still to this day, churns along really well. So many people are like, it's the best coaching book I've read. And I think I did that after about 150 podcasts. And I tried to distill the lessons in that book down to, these 4 questions, right? Of like, why do I coach? How do I coach? So there's the science of learning. This 3rd question is super important. What does it feel like to be coached by me? Right? I don't think a lot of us consider that. And then how do I define success? And so that's what that book was about. And I remember people always ask me, when I'm writing a book, like, what's the title? And for John O'Sullivan, the title is usually the last thing I come up with, right? Or, you have a working idea, but it never comes together till the end. And so I was sitting there with my brother saying, I got this book. I'm really happy with it. I just am struggling with the title. And he's like, well, tell me what the essence of it. And I just, said, it's about being super intentional about what you do. And we sign off every podcast with this idea like your influence is never neutral, right? Every time you walk into a room, you leave either a positive or negative impact. And the more aware of your influence you are, the more powerful it is, right? And I'm like, how do we say that? And just, we never know. Something we say or do could stick with a kid for the rest of their life. And my brother's like, so like every moment matters. I'm like, and there we go. That's how the title came along. So yes, I do believe it does, because you never know when you're working with someone, and anyone who's been in coaching knows this, that you have a player comes back 30 years later, they will say, remember that time when you said this? And the answer is probably no, you don't remember that time. But they do. And 30 years later, they remember, and that changed their life either for better or for worse. And so, yeah, every moment does matter.
I love the line, you cannot not communicate.
Yeah.
With your energy, tone. It's such a great line to keep in mind as managers, as leaders, as coaches. Even when you walk into the room, your energy matters.
Yeah.
So every moment matters, and being intentional about that, I think, is super cool. All right, I want to land this episode sharing some research that I reread. When you read something years ago, it's a bit like when I watched your TED Talk years ago. I obviously watched it again this morning before the interview to refresh my mind. And some research that I read by Cliff Mallett out of Queensland, who studied 14 of the most serial winning coaches. And with these 14 coaches, there were 3 common themes. Number 1, coach as lifelong learner because they're curious. Number 2, coach as performer. And number 3, coach as architect. And I love it when I can just remember that without reading that anywhere as well, when you reread something. So with those 3 things in mind, I'd love your top 3 tips for coaches out there and your reflection on what I just shared.
Yeah. Well, first of all, amen to that, especially the first one, the lifelong learner, the curiosity. We were just having this conversation before I came on with you, where Jerry and I, when we do our podcast, that when the guests leave, we do, and we record an outro to it. And we were talking about this common theme of the best tend to have this lifelong learner mentality. The people at the top are the most curious. The people at the level below the top are usually the ones stuck by ego, and they don't get there because they don't want to seem like they don't know it all, right? But the best of the best, and I'm talking, every conversation I've had with Steve Kerr has ended with, you have any good books? Anything that you recommend, right? I mean, that sticks in my head, is like the most curious people are the ones who are never done learning, are the ones who don't let their ego get in the way of getting better every single day. And so that really resonates with me. The architect, yeah, we are the architects of the environment, right? We own that. And so that really resonates with me a ton as well. Like, if it's not good, I think John O'Sullivan, the young coach, when it wasn't good, blamed the players. John O'Sullivan, who's done it for 30 years, first looks at himself and says, what could I have done better on this day? What did I miss? Or, what's wrong? And what I started doing, especially the last decade of my coaching career, is really asking the players, like, this doesn't seem to be working. What do you think this activity needs? Is it, we need more space, more players, more defenders, less whatever, and giving them the opportunity to go, hey, I think if we just bump the sideline out a little bit, or no, it's good, coach, this one's on us, we're just not really focused right now, we'll fix it, right? So that's sort of, not being the sage on the stage, but being just the facilitator of this environment, but really all the knowledge and it comes from them, and I'm just trying to, it's already there, right? I don't have to fill the empty vessels. So yeah, Those things really stick. What does he mean by performer?
Yeah, from what I read, it's when we show up, no matter what's happening in our life prior to stepping on the field or the court or into the boardroom, we are now letting go of our own stuff and fully there and present, almost performing to deliver the message or to create the environment or to trust our intuition of asking what question needs to be opened up to the group here.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, again, that's, that's the ability of coaching, is like this goes back to the circle, right? Here's the circle, and now we're all performers in this bubble for the next 2 hours. And then when we leave the bubble, all the other stuff in our lives can come back in. Even though I can't let go of all of it, I can still give the best I'm capable of giving today. And that goes for the coach as well, 100%.
Yeah. What 3 tips do you want to leave us with?
As a coach, as a leader?
Yeah.
I mean, number one, coaching, leadership, it's not an X's and O's, it's a relationship game, right? It's all about winning relationships. And sadly, I think in coaching training, especially, we don't talk about the most important stuff, which is that. Number 2, the basis of it all is love, right? Not creepy love, but love for your people. And this deep love that you want to make them better. Because it's a selfless act. And then number 3, I think this goes into sort of humility and all this sort of stuff, but just asking, like, not what can I get from this, but what can I give, right? And if I bring this, this love and this attitude of how can I serve, what can I give, then I'm going to be really successful.
From the right fit to self-coach, teammates coach, and then the coach's coach, flowing down the river of vulnerability with competence, and be a flute to the message for others. Our softest pillow is a clear conscience. It's been an honor and a pleasure spending, just around 40 minutes of our life that we'll all never get back. May we fall forward, and I love watching you play, and I love interviewing you. Thank you, John O'Sullivan, for being on the Coaching Podcast.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who listened. And if you can't get that 40 minutes back, at least maybe you had a good beer with it or a cup of coffee.
Or maybe you even take action on one thing that triggered.
Maybe. Start small.
Yeah, start small. And one thing also, I just want to finish on, the one that really hit me today was, how does it feel like to be coached by me? I'll leave everybody with that thought, and thanks for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show.